Hello and welcome to the viewers of this video. This is the Orange Fan here, bringing you another entry for the episode Recap and Thoughts category. This video will be dedicated to episode 22 of Young Justice Agendas. We begin this episode at the Watchtower on November 25th, where DC's trinity of heroes, Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman, are all standing in the garden of the Watchtower. This episode marks the first time Wonder Woman has dialogue, and she's voiced by Maggie Q. Aquaman soon enters the garden to let the three other members of the Justice League that are present that the rest of the Justice League members have arrived and are waiting in the meeting room because all the members of the Justice League are going to have what else but a meeting. Dr. Fate is also present for this particular meeting. I believe Greg Weisman had once mentioned that Dr. Fate was using Zatara's designation number after the events of Misplaced. Now, throughout the course of the episode, we do get various scenes of the Justice League's meeting, but I'm going to go ahead and mention the highlights right now so the rest of the recap can be focused on the main plot of the episode. Martian Manhunter warns his teammates that expanding the Justice League could lead to other villainous groups forming, referencing the Injustice League back in Revelation. Superman acknowledges this, and he also makes a point to let the rest of the league know that they always have the right to vote no on all of the potential candidates. And Superman's actually the first to make a suggestion. He wants to suggest Icon, and Wonder Woman agrees with him and also suggests Icon's protege, Rocket. Batman brings up how Atom's small size could be useful, and Flash brings up the third Earth-based Green Lantern, Guy Gardner, but the other two Green Lantern members from Earth and they're both Justice League members, Hal Jordan and John Stewart, they do not like the idea of Guy Gardner joining the Justice League. Green Arrow brings up the possibility of Red Arrow, pointing out that he's 18 years old, but Aquaman doesn't like the doesn't like the idea of Red Arrow joining, thinking that he's too disrespectful. Superman does seem to consider Red Arrow as a possibility because he's 18, he doesn't think that the rest of the he doesn't think anyone from the Young Justice team should join the Justice League for being younger than Red Arrow. And we do get a quick moment where we see Zatara's presence is still felt within Dr. Fate because he doesn't like the idea of Zatanna being suggested for League membership. And when Captain Marvel questions why Dr. Fate is in the League because of what Nabu had pretty much persuaded Zatara into becoming the host for Dr. Fate. Dr. Fate reveals that Zatara doesn't trust Nabu, so he wants Dr. Fate to be part of the Justice League because he thinks the rest of the Justice League will keep Dr. Fate in check. Plastic Man is brought up as a potential candidate as well, although some of the league voiced their disapproval of his criminal record. And then they all bring up if Captain Marvel should stay in the Justice League because of the fact that he's actually a kid, Billy Batson. Wonder Woman in particular voices her disapproval of Captain Marvel not mentioning that he was a kid. And even though Captain Marvel clarifies he never lied, he just never brought up being a kid, Wonder Woman seems to think that omissions and lies are considered the same thing. But Batman points out that he knew Captain Marvel's true age all along, which leads to a quick disagreement. Wonder Woman brings up how Batman introduced Robin to crime fighting when Robin was 9 years old. But Batman points out that Robin had to bring the ones had to bring the criminals who wronged his family to justice because Batman didn't want Robin to end up like him, Batman. And the debate about chronology versus biology is also brought up. Martian Manhunter brings up that Miss Martian is 48 Earth years old, even though she's 16 Martian years old. And Superboy is brought up too, since chronologically he's less than a year old, but biologically he's 16 years old. So those are kind of the big highlights for the Justice League meeting. So on to the main plot of the episode. We're at Mount Justice, and we see that it's actually Thanksgiving as well, because Superboy, Miss Martian, and Zatanna are all getting ready for Thanksgiving. Kid Flash visits them briefly, but then he quickly heads back home so he isn't late for Thanksgiving with his family. And Zatanna admits that this will be the first Thanksgiving that she'll have without her dad. And then Superboy receives a message at a frequency that Kryptonians can hear, but humans can't hear. And because Superman is currently on the Watchtower, that means Superboy is the only one of the two Kryptonians who actually can hear this message. The one sending the one who sends the message to Superboy wants him to come to Washington, D.C. for something. So Superboy leaves. He tells Zatanna and Miss Martian that he's just taking Wolf for a walk. So Superboy, Wolf, and the Supercycle all arrive in Washington, D.C., where they meet Lex Luthor. Lex Luthor claims himself to be the new chairman of the board of Cadmus, although Superboy is already familiar with Lex Luthor and he doesn't want anything to do with him. But he changes his tune when Lex Luthor brings out that Cadmus is making another super clone. Cadmus has been fully rebuilt after the events of Fireworks, and Superboy demands to be let in or else he'll come in the hard way. But Guardian approves. Yeah, Guardian approves of letting Superboy in, even though Dr. Spence voices disagreement with this idea. And when Superboy arrives, Guardian is actually confused about Superboy talking about another superclone. And Dr. Spence mentions that the superclone projects have been shut down after Superboy had left, although her choice of words upsets Superboy, to say the least. And at one point, Guardian removes his helmet, and Superboy points out that Guardian bears a strong resemblance to Red Arrow. Guardian says that's not hard to... It's understandable because Guardian is the uncle of Red Arrow. And he goes around and gives Superboy a tour of how Cadmus has changed since he's last been there. And he says that the Genomorphs are no longer being treated as potential weapons, but they're seen as staff members for Cadmus as well, or fellow staff members. Some of them even have names. Double X contacts Superboy telepathically, and he assures Superboy that Guardian is being sincere and he can be trusted. Although Double X does also bring up how he's still hoping to bring the Genomorphs, or hoping that the Genomorphs can join society as Superboy has. And he also questions what Superboy intends to do with this supposed superclone that he's trying to find. And Superboy says he intends to free the clone just as he was freed by Robin, Aqualad, and Kid Flash. Guardian says he has to go find some Genomorphs that are missing, but he does allow Superboy to explore Cadmus to search for this superclone. Eventually, and Wolf is with Superboy the whole time, I should mention that too. So Superboy and Wolf eventually arrive in the room where Superboy's pod was, but Wolf notices something strange about the wall, and when Superboy goes to check it out, there's a secret door. And when they enter, it's a secret chamber which is full of many experiments. There are all these pods containing various experiments. And there's one of them that's said called Project Match. And inside, it looks like Superboy, another clone that does bear a resemblance to Superboy. But when Superboy opens the pod and frees Match's eyes open, and we do see a notable difference. Match has black sclera rather than white, and he's a lot more feral-minded. He's, much more angrier. He's angrier than the Superboy we know, and feral-minded. He can't even talk. He just yells and screams, and he seems to be angered by the Superman crest on Superboy's shirt. And Superboy quickly finds out, though, that Match seems to be much more powerful than him, Superboy. And he has abilities that Superboy doesn't have, such as flying and heat vision. And Superboy and Wolf try their best, but they're both knocked out by Match eventually. During the fight, though, Superboy managed to destroy the Superman crest on Match's solar suit, and Match notices this on his reflection, so he uses his heat vision to create a new S symbol on him, but it ends up looking backwards because he was looking through a reflective surface. But when Superboy regains consciousness, he finds himself in a solar suit and in a pod again, and he does not react well. Guardian, Double X, and Dr. Spence quickly arrive, and Dr. Spence tries to convince him that it was the fastest way to heal his wounds, but Superboy is not willing to listen, and he accuses Dr. Spence of making Match. But Guardian quickly assures him that Dr. Spence was as surprised as the rest of them when they saw Match on the security footage. But they don't know what happened to him because the security footage was blacked out before they could see what happened after the fight. So Guardian's going to continue the search, and Double X also leaves as well. And there's a computer screen where Lex Luthor contacts Superboy. And while Superboy has questions about Match, Lex Luthor kind of claims that he doesn't really know much about Match, but says he's more familiar with Superboy, how Kryptonian DNA is hard for scientists from Earth to read. And Superboy's, what happened with Superboy is that they had to use human DNA to fill in the blanks of the Kryptonian DNA, so to speak. But that's why Superboy doesn't have Superman's full powers, and why, under normal circumstances, he never will gain Superman's full powers. And I say under normal circumstances because Lex Luthor sends over a container which has these patches that are, these red patches that are shaped like the Superman crest. Lex Luthor calls them shields, and he says that when Superboy wears one, it'll give him Superman's full powers for an hour because it'll suppress his human DNA. While Superboy doesn't want the shields, Lex insists that he keep them anyway, just in case. And Double X ends up contacting Superboy telepathically, and Superboy takes this point to mention that he noticed Double X was hiding something because of his elevated heart rate. And Double X admits that he is keeping something, and he does know where Match is. He directs Superboy and Wolf to a place that he calls Xenomorph City, which is where the Xenomorphs can form their society, at least until they eventually can go up to the surface or join the rest of Earth's society like Superboy has. He also shows Superboy that Match is... he's chained up, and some Xenomorphs are telepathically calming him because... well, they worry that he could damage the Xenomorph City. Superboy opposes this, but when Match regains consciousness and he sees the Superman crest on Superboy, he once again goes into a state of rage and starts to attack. Eventually, Superboy feels he has no choice but to use Lex Luthor's shield. So he uses one, and true enough, he does gain Superman's full powers, and he's able to match. Pardon the pun. But eventually, though, even though Superboy defeats Match, he keeps on attacking Match until eventually Guardian, Mercy Graves, and several other Cadmus staff members arrive. And Guardian tries to talk Superboy out of attacking Match because, as he points out, Superboy has already won. And while Superboy isn't happy about Match having to be put back into his pod, Guardian tries to assure him that it is the best course of action for the time being. And oh yeah, Double X is also disappointed that Xenomorph City was revealed. So Superboy then heads back to where he met Lex Luthor, and he kind of calls out Lex Luthor for knowing about Match, because Double X ended up finding out from the oldest Xenomorphs that Match was actually the first super clone that was created, and that Lex Luthor had authorized Match's creation, or he gave Mark Desmond the approval to create Match. And Lex Luthor admits this. He also admits that he wanted to find the missing Xenomorphs as well. The container of the shields had a tracking device in it. But Lex Luthor also brings up Superboy's question about who the donor of the human DNA he has is. And it is Lex Luthor himself, who tries to call himself Superboy's father. And he brings up how Superman hasn't given Superboy any affection, saying that Superman has a black and white morality, and even though the real world is full of grays. And while Superboy tries to give the shields back, Lex Luthor says to keep them as a gift from a father to his son. But when Superboy grabs Lex's tie and prepares to attack him, he says Red Sun, which causes Superboy to shut down, essentially. When Superboy regains control of himself again, or he wakes up again, so to speak, all he has is Lex's tie, and it's dark out. Superboy wonders what else Lex could make him do. He's about to throw the shields into the nearby river, but he ends up holding on to them afterwards. Back at the Watchtower, the League decide that they're ready to see the results of the vote, see who will join the Justice League or who will stay in the Justice League or leave the Justice League, and that's how we end the episode. Now, this is not only the Thanksgiving episode, but it's also another Superboy Spotlight episode. But truth be told, I actually like the subplot of the episode the best. The Justice League meeting. That was actually my favorite part of this particular episode. And that's because, at least with the first two seasons, who knows what will happen in the third season, but I felt like this episode gave the Justice League the most screen time that they've had across the first two seasons of Young Justice. And it was really cool to kind of see them actually having a meeting. And it was pretty insightful as well. Like, we got to see, the thing I liked a lot was how Batman admitted that he had Robin start crime fighting early because he didn't want Robin to turn out like him. And that was a nice parallel because Robin admitted in Disordered, and as we saw in the previous episode, Image, Robin didn't want to become the next Batman, and we find out Batman actually would be very happy with that. So that was pretty cool. And it does bring up a lot of interesting debates, that's right, we got to see Wonder Woman in a more prevalent role so far, and I liked Maggie Q's performance, and a lot of people were actually wondering if Wonder Woman and Superman were dating. They were noticing all those subtle body language, and the body language. A lot of people were wondering, are Superman and Wonder Woman dating in Young Justice? And it is interesting to point out Lois Lane hasn't really appeared in the Young Justice TV show so far. And as far as the tie-in comics go, she does get mentioned in the tie-in comics, but I wouldn't call it an actual appearance. I might go more into that if I do end up covering the tie-in comics, but it has caused a lot of speculation, actually, among people. And I know Wonder Woman's comments about lying and omission with Captain Marvel, that caused a bit of interesting debate as well. Like, some people argue, like, would you count, or that's an argument over semantics, I noticed. Like, personally for me, yeah, because of the way I define them, I don't count lying and omission to be the same thing. I see omission as leaving out details, while I see lying as deliberately giving false information. But it does bring up that interesting point, how people may debate over certain terminology or definitions for terms. It's a pretty cool it's a pretty important debate, or yeah, it's an important topic to bring up, because people are going to have different definitions, or different, yeah, terms will mean something different to different people. So it's an interesting I'm glad that they did cover that. Otherwise, yeah, while the Justice League meeting was my favorite part of the episode, I still did enjoy parts of the main plot of the episode. We did get to learn a little bit more about Superboy's creation, and we did get to meet his older brother, Match, and we kind of did get an explanation for why Superboy doesn't have Superman's full powers. At first, some people were wondering, like, will they develop over time? But no, it seems under normal circumstances, he's not going to have those abilities. But the shields that Lex Luthor provided him do give him a way to obtain Superman's full power set. But the way how Superboy was acting even more aggressive than he usually was during the fight with Match, that kind of does bring up the cost or the price of that power. And actually, it's brought up too even with Match, because Match has Superman's full power set, but he's so feral-minded and so enraged that you can't really reason with him. So it's definitely it was definitely an interesting topic on, like, the price for power. And well, we'll see more of those shields. They'll be coming up in down the road, or we'll see Superboy using them again later. So we'll cross that bridge when we do eventually reach it. And otherwise, oh yeah, we did get a few references to the main comics as well, like how Guardian is Red Arrow's uncle. Although Young Justice, the TV show, does do a little twist about that, actually. It happens in season 2, so we'll cover that then. I won't mention it now for the sake of those who are just following along for the first time. And Lex Luthor being Superboy's human father. Yeah, his human father was also in the main comics. Although I believe that particular detail was actually I believe that was a retcon, though. I think that wasn't originally the case in the main comics. Oh, and speaking of Lex Luthor, yeah, he actually had a pretty valid point towards the end of the episode, and that really stood out to me. Like, even though Lex Luthor is considered a villain, he actually brings up a very good point that real life is not cut and dry, where only good people will make good choices and only bad people will make bad choices. Real life is full of shades of gray, as he puts it, where you can have good people who might do bad actions or make bad choices, or you might have bad people who might do good choices or good actions from time to time as well. But that's always been an important detail to me, is recognizing the shades of gray, recognizing that life isn't so clear cut. So that always stood out to me, and it was pretty interesting that they had Lex Luthor, of all people, bring up that valid point. But I guess that helps to reinforce that point all the more. So there you go overall. I definitely said, like I said, I definitely liked the Justice League meeting the best of this episode, but I still enjoyed parts of the main plot of the episode as well. With that said, we've now discussed episode 22 of Young Justice on this channel. Take care, and until next time.